Welcome to another edition of Teach the Geek Interviews. My name is Neil Thompson. I'm the founder of Teach the Geek. I work with technical professionals so they can present more effectively, especially in front of non-technical audiences. And you can learn more about that at teachthegeek.com. Again, that's teachthegeek.com. Today, my guest is Doug Squirrel. He is an advisor, author, speaker, coach, and consultant. What does he not do? But he helps make technical teams more profitable. Well, what does that mean? How did he come to such work? And how does public speaking figure into all of it? Let's find out. Welcome to Teach the Geek Interviews, Douglas.
Hello.
So, from the bit of research I did on you, I saw that you studied math in school. What was the motivation to
I
do
did.
that?
I loved maths and nobody stopped me doing it. So they kept saying, you're doing well at this, and eventually you'll become a professor and you'll teach people maths. And I really liked the teaching part. But what nobody told me was that you had to do a whole bunch of other stuff when you were a professor, and most of that was really crummy. And as I saw that as a graduate student, I said, this isn't for me. I want to do more teaching. So that's how I wound up writing code and doing a lot of education and helping people to learn how to write better code. And then I became a consultant so I can help people how to make use of whole teams of people in a much more effective and profitable way.
Okay, so you went into, I suppose, graduate school thinking that you're going to be a professor. Did you actually ever follow through and get your PhD?
I didn't. I'm all but dissertation. I have a candidate's degree. It just means I did all the stuff you have to do except the hard part.
Got it. Yeah, I understand where you're coming from. I started a PhD program, but I didn't finish it. I got a year into it and I realized I don't want to be here. And so I left. So I don't have to be there
That's what
anymore.
happened to me. Exactly. And I didn't have to, and I was much happier.
Yeah, same here. So now you leave your okay, so you leave your program. What did you do next?
So I went off and I became a software developer. So I had a lot of fun writing code all day, and that was something I'd always been excited about. So it got me to use some of my mathematical skills, but also I got to do things that involved other people and helping them to understand, which is closer to the topic that we're covering today. So I did speaking at conferences. I brought on new developers and taught them how to do things better. I became a manager and then a CTO. So I did a lot with helping other people and speaking to them about the software, and that got more and more exciting as I did more and more of it. Unlike the maths, which became less and less exciting.
I got it, got it. How does having a background in math help in becoming a developer?
Oh, fascinating. Well, one of the things you learn in mathematics is to be very, very precise, but also creative. Because mathematicians, for just to take a very simple example, you might know how addition works, but mathematicians invent their own addition that works in very strange and bizarre ways. And so they have to be very creative while still following the laws of addition, but they get to warp those laws, they get to change them around. Almost like a jazz musician, follows the rules of tonality and chords and harmony, but warps them and twists them and tries them in different ways. And one way to be a really successful developer is not to be faster, not necessarily to know the latest libraries or the latest code, because I was never good at that stuff, but to be more creative, to come up with better solutions, to do things that are more useful to your ultimate customers, and maybe write no code at all, but get a better solution for them. And that's what I wound up using from maths in my coding career.
You mentioned also that you managed people at some point. What's one
Oh
thing
yeah.
that yeah, what's one thing that you did not anticipate but ended up being the case by managing people?
Oh, fascinating. What was surprising about that? Um, what was surprising, I guess what jumps to my mind right now is how many misunderstandings there are, how many times communication just doesn't work as well as you would like. And I wound up writing an entire book called Agile Conversations. By the way, I'll offer to your listeners, Neil, if they'd like a free copy of this book, just write to me. It's a commercial book. It's from IT Revolution. I'm not trying to sell books. But I wrote this book about all those miscommunications. I'll just tell you one story to kind of illustrate. I had an engineer in my team, super duper geek, wore Star Wars t-shirts all day, really, really into maths and coding and everything, very, very intellectual, but not very practical. And this poor guy, we were awarding stock options, so you could get an option to sell your shares in some future moment when they were valuable and make a lot of money. That happened to me, and that was a good thing with one of the companies I worked at. This guy was getting more stock options, and we were explaining it to him and the other people in the team. And he just got more and more red in the face. He got more and more angry. And I thought, why is he angry? We're giving him more. We're supporting him. We're helping him here. And he eventually called me aside and told me, and he said, Squirrel, I can't believe you're stealing this. You told me that these share options would be worth something. They're worth nothing. You've cheated me. I'm so angry with you. And I said, hang on a second, Adam, I just gave you more here. What he'd mixed up was this notion, this kind of technical notion, but the idea that you would sell the shares for a high price and you would buy them at this low price called a strike price. And we were describing the strike price, this low price that you would buy the shares at, and then you'd immediately sell them and you'd make the difference, right? So you want the first number to be low. That would be a good thing. He'd mixed it up. He thought that that number being low meant the value of his shares and that we had stolen it from him. And so he was really angry. This kind of miscommunication happens all the time. It wasn't Adam's fault that I was being unclear in describing it to him. It wasn't my fault because I knew what I was trying to explain, but I didn't have the skills. I wasn't able to get feedback from him, so I knew where he was confused. It was a natural misunderstanding. The computers don't misunderstand you in that way. They misunderstand you in a lot of other ways. But if you told them A plus B is C, they'll get C every time. Adam was adding things up and getting a different number. And that was a real problem. So I thought people would be like computers. It turns out they're not. What a surprise.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, even the most logical of us think we could be like Spock, but we're not. We all have emotion
Not quite.
to
It doesn't work. Yeah. Which is why you need techniques like are in the book, which help you to deal with perhaps quite technical people who think that they're talking to computers who really aren't. And how can you work with them and make a profit from them?
Was it always your goal to be a manager, or did it kind of fall into your lap?
Oh, it just fell into my lap one day. The owner of the company I was working at, we had spun out from another company, and so he was walking around to everybody to hand out new business cards. He was saying, "We're going to order the new business cards. How do I spell your name? How do I make sure I get it all right?" And he came to me, and he knew me very well, and he said, "Squirrel, I'm going to make your business cards." I said, "Great. Tell me when they're done." He came back. He handed me a stack of business cards that said CTO on them. I had never been a chief technology officer. I had no idea what a chief technology officer did. I'd never met one. But he handed me the business card and I said, I guess I better figure this out. And I wound up leading a team of 50 and having a blast moving into markets I'd never even understood before. So it was tremendously rewarding, but an absolute surprise.
When it comes to leading a team of technical people, do you think it's necessary to have a technical background yourself, or is it
Not at all.
all right? Okay. Yeah, I
Yeah, I
wondered
just got
about
off the
that.
phone with a brilliant head of product. This guy's just off the charts how good he is. Doesn't write a line of code, but he doesn't need to in order to have a really helpful, deep, meaningful conversation about how the product works, what the limitations are. He's done this so many times that he's got this very deep understanding of how to motivate and work effectively with geeky people like me. And I just have all the time in the world for folks like that. They're very, very skilled, and they don't have to write code themselves.
For the people who are listening or watching our conversation, Douglas, and they have aspirations to be managers of people, how would you suggest they prepare?
Observe lots of managers, so make sure you have some, and you can watch them doing a good job or a poor job, and form your own opinions about what works and what doesn't. Read a book called High Output Management by a guy called Andrew Grove. He ran Intel, which had tens of thousands of employees, so he kind of should know how managers work. And the great thing about the book is it's kind of management for dummies. It really doesn't assume you know anything about being a manager, and it teaches you everything from first principles. And then you can skip over the parts you know, which is perfectly fine. But it makes sure it doesn't miss anything. So that's a very good source. And experience in screwing up. I like to say, I have a huge store of screw up stories, all the things I made tons of mistakes on, both being a manager and being an employee, and both in things in between. And if you can draw on those stories and use them effectively, then and I'm showing that to you here, Neil. I'm telling some stories as we talk to each other, including the one about Adam. I can use that and say, here's a way that I misunderstood somebody else. So Neil, as you take your first steps to being a manager, don't make these kinds of communication mistakes because you don't want to wind up like me and Adam. That story is really meaningful. But I had to go through the experience. I had to develop the story. I had to disappoint my friend Adam, which I never wanted to do. I wanted him to be a happy engineer. But in order to have the experience to apply it, I needed to screw up.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. hopefully you can learn from other people's mistakes too, but I suspect
Well,
that
that's useful. You want to observe the mistakes and also participate in them, but you got to have enough that have you in them, or they you don't learn enough.
indeed. So what prompted you to go offline and start your own thing, Douglas?
Well, I kept getting fired, and I kept getting fired from one startup after the next in a really, really nice way. So the founder of the company would come to me, and that person would say, "Squirrel, you've built this amazing technology team. They have this great process they're following. There's a leader you've trained who keeps them on track. They're building everything that I need. It's really working great. And there's not very much for you to do anymore. And you're kind of expensive. So would you please go be wonderful somewhere else?" And the third or fourth time that happened, I said, maybe there's a message here. Maybe I should listen, because it also kept getting shorter. So it would be 10, it was 10 years and then 2 years and then 1 year. And I said, maybe this is kind of what I'm destined to do. This is what I'm good at, is get things sorted out and then get out of the way. And so that's what I've continued doing for over 300 organizations around the world. And what I do is I come in, make changes, coach people, change process, teach people new things, set up a strategy. And then 2, 3 months in, I'm in a good state. I've got that company in a good position, and I move on to somebody else. And I'll do 7 or 8 of those at a time. And it's tremendously rewarding, gives me huge experience in lots of different places. I get lots of stories, and it's great for me, but it's also great that I get the job done very quickly, and I help the team be much more profitable almost overnight.
Okay. How do you go about finding companies to work with?
Well, that's one of the interesting puzzles is that you're asking great questions, by the way, Neil. Um, One of the puzzles in today's market, in today's world, is it's so fragmented where you get information. When I was a tiny child, when I was growing up, there were, you read magazines or you watched telly or you listened to the radio, and there wasn't very many other places that you could find things out. So, if you wanted to be known to people, you bought a little ad in the back of a magazine, or you got the editor to interview you, or you got yourself on the morning radio show or something. Now there's your podcast and about 10,000 others. I'm sure you're better than most of those, and I'm enjoying your questions. But you've got to find good podcasts to be on. You've got to find good conferences to speak at. I'm keynoting in Belgium, even though I don't speak French. So that's going to be fun. Je ne parle beaucoup français. So you've got to find lots and lots of different places to be seen and heard so that people will know there's this guy called Squirrel, and he has these crazy ideas about making teams profitable and releasing new software every day and communicating better with your engineers. You should talk to him. So that's the way people know about me, is through word of mouth, vigorously supported by lots of public speaking and podcasts like this, and the forum that I run, and the free events that I run every week, and so on. I'm trying to be as visible as I possibly can.
What types of organizations do you work with?
Oh, every kind in the world. So let's see. I'm going to run through my current client base. So I've got a German insurance company. I've got two, strangely, artificial intelligence voice companies. They do very different things, but they all have to do with getting duplicating people's voices, making artificial voices. Who else have I got? I just picked up a Boston-based real estate company. I just finished with a Las Vegas-based hunting equipment company. I've had clients in Australia and Africa. Africa is just exploding. The number of developers and really, really good people building amazing software in Nigeria and Kenya is huge. So I've had several clients there in local industry and building commercial solutions and extractive solutions for mining industries and so on there. Probably loads and loads of others. I mean, it is 300 odd organizations over about 9 years.
When it comes to the teams that you work with, I suspect that it's somewhat higher up that brings you into these organizations to work with these teams. So the people that are on the team, they weren't involved necessarily with you coming in
Ooh,
and working with
not
them.
always. Not always. So it goes two ways. So one way is the one you described, where somebody says, "My God, my tech team, I send all this money and it just goes into this black hole, and I don't know what they're doing or whether it's valuable. Squirrel, come sort me out." That was an example from today, where there's a tech team in a faraway location, a sort of home team that's employing that outsourced organization, and they're saying to me, "Squirrel, are these people doing a good job?" So I've been assessing that all day. That's where I came to you from. But then there are other cases where somebody within the tech organization comes to me and says, "My God, Squirrel, we're doing everything wrong. Nothing seems to be working. We really need to improve here." I've got one of those that I need to talk to tomorrow, where somebody quite low down in the organization said, "We need your help," and I'm working my way up. So, and I just keep asking, who has the money? Who cares about profit around here? Because I can help with profit. And I think I've found my way to the right person. I'm going to be talking to them soon, so that I can make sure to describe to them why their person within the organization said, "Hey, things are broken here," and how that could be advantageous to them in better revenue, lower costs, and better business results.
In the event that the situation is someone higher up is the one who brought you in and the team that you're working with wasn't involved in that decision, how do you deal with people who perhaps resent the fact that you're even working with them in the first place?
Yep, I have a thick skin. So 300 organizations in, I can tell you there are plenty of times when people don't like me, and I'm okay with that. But what I do ask them to do is to be accountable, to be clear, to be honest with me about what they're dissatisfied about. And usually, not in every case, but usually what I find is that the thing that's causing difficulty to the person upstairs who is saying, "Hey, wait, I'm putting all this money in, I'm not getting a return on my investment, revenue isn't up, they keep asking for more resources." That person has certain sort of concerns, which are mirrored by the people lower down, just at their level. So those people might be saying things like, "We never hear from the customers. Our salespeople are selling things that we can't build, that are physically impossible, and nobody ever comes and asks us." And typically, you have a disconnect between those folks. Guess what? It's a missing conversation. There's somebody who hasn't had good communication, and what's happened is sort of what happened between me and Adam in my earlier story, but at a much broader level, where somebody hasn't understood what the profitable opportunities are in the tech organization, and the person at the top who's putting in the money says, "My God, these people don't understand me." Both of them are right. And the trick is to figure out how it could benefit both of them to solve the problem. Very, very rarely do I come along and say, "This is hopeless. These folks don't know what they're doing. Have them move on." I do that, but that's not, it's very, very rare in my practice. Much more commonly, I'm saying, "These folks have part of the solution. Those folks who brought me in have the other part of the solution. Let's do both parts."
Got it. Douglas, when I started this podcast and YouTube channel, it was all about the motivation was my own struggles, having to give presentations and
Absolutely.
yeah, having to give
Best kind.
having to give presentations in front of people, but I got a lot better at it over time. When it comes to your own public speaking, is that something you've always been good at? And if not, what did you do to get better at it?
So certainly not something I was always good at, and I wouldn't claim I'm that great at it right now. But people who are curious whether I'm great at it can go see about 150. I think there's like 100 public ones and a number of private ones, which are just available to people in my community. Easy to join my community. And all of that's at squirrelsquadron.com, because I do these weekly events, which are free. And if you go to squirrelsquadron.com and look at the archive of previous events, you can see me talking on screens like this with loads of people around the world discussing all kinds of interesting topics related to technology, making technology more profitable. I'm talking to CFOs and CEOs and COOs and CTOs, people in the technology organization too. And I don't claim I did do it great, but I do practice a lot. I do these things live. I'm doing a keynote in a while. I just went up to London and did an event for 30 or 40 of my community members and so on. I'm hoping to do one in Boston later this year. So I practice as much as I can. And my model for that is the Beatles. Do you know how the Beatles became the Beatles? Do you know the story?
I don't.
So one part of the story, I'll just tell you the part that's relevant here, is that they kind of got together and they did have the name the Beatles. I think they might have had a slightly different name. And it was mostly the band members who became famous. But they weren't famous yet. Nobody had ever heard of these guys. And they got a tiny little record contract, and they got a tiny little contract to play every single night in a club in Hamburg. And Hamburg is not a mecca of innovative music today, and neither was it in 1962. It was kind of seedy bars and people not wearing very many clothes, and kind of not a great district. But they showed up every night, and they played music. The kind of music played was called skiffle music, they played skiffle over and over and over again, and really badly, I suspect, at first. They weren't really great at it. but they practiced every day and in front of a live audience. So they got lots and lots of feedback. They could tell when people were excited, when they weren't, what worked, what didn't. They really honed their art. And when they came back from Hamburg, having done this, kind of gone through the purgatory of trying and trying and trying and learning very quickly from what failed, then they were a tremendously successful band. That's when they got their break and really became famous. So I certainly won't claim I'm the world's greatest public speaker right now. I may never be, and that's okay. But I'm practicing a lot in public, and I'm perfectly happy to embarrass myself, get things wrong. One of my challenges right now is sometimes when I wear a blue shirt on my screen on one of my events, the whole background turns blue. I got to figure out what's going on with that. So, that kind of mistake I'm happy to make because it means I get better at my craft. And therefore, all of those sorts of things should add up together to make me a more successful public speaker in the future.
Do you have a process for putting presentations together? And if so, what is it?
Yeah, it's very simple. It involves, let me see if I can find the vital tool that I use. Here it is, and here's an example of some of my notes. So I use one of these, and I write enough to fit on this. It's enough to remind me about what to talk about. This is from one of my events. I was going to talk about, let's see if I can say what I was going to do. So I wanted to talk about chasing down my boss one time, and the same boss who made me the CTO in the story before. So that was a story I wanted to tell. I wanted to talk about a concept I have called betterism, the concept that somehow there is a better way to do things. There isn't. Another process called joint design. And I wanted to tell people to think about confidence, enthusiasm, and volume. So this was a conversation about how to involve other people and have better conversations. And so I wanted to tell all those stories and help the group to improve their skills. That took me about 15 minutes. I did it 15 minutes before the event. And I do that on purpose. I make sure I don't have tons and tons of notes, everything written down, loads of cards to go through. I never use slides. I'm as off the cuff and spontaneous as I possibly can manage. And you can judge for yourself how well that works. I wouldn't let you tell me any of the questions before we had this podcast. I said I'm much better off the cuff. I may not be great at that, but I'm practicing all the time because what I want to do is to be as non-dependent as possible. If I need to follow a 17-step process that I have to spend 2 weeks performing in order to do any kind of speaking, I won't do enough speaking. So I want to have it as simple a process as I can and as brief and as spontaneous as I can possibly manage.
Do you ever get nervous before presentations? And if so, how do you deal with your nerves?
Oh, I think everybody does. You get some butterflies in front of a live audience. Now, I've done enough of these kinds of things. I'm not nervous right now. I'm not nervous when I do my live streams and live events and so on, because that's really familiar. But when I turn up in Belgium, in a city I'm not actually sure I remember the name of, and I'm going to be giving this talk to a group of people who mainly speak French, I'll be a little nervous there. But the technique for that is extremely simple. It's called walking on stage, and the nerves go away for me. Now, I know that's a lot more challenging for some people. I'm lucky enough that I haven't ever had any major challenges with that. But one thing that has helped me, and I especially coach people on when they have much greater stage fright or much greater concern in that area, is I just remind them that nobody is going to take any money from them. Nobody is going to shoot at them. Nobody is going to kidnap them. There is no danger here. And the people who are in the audience don't want to have wasted their time. So that you're starting with a lot on your side. You're starting with the deck stacked in your favor. And if you can remind yourself of that, I find that helps a lot.
For the people who are listening or watching our conversation, Douglas, and they want to get better or more effective at presenting or public speaking generally, what's one tip you could offer them?
Absolutely. So this is a technique. This is an exercise I give to my coaching clients. I'll ask you, Neil, do you have any conveniently located 8-year-olds around you?
I do not.
You do not. Do you have anybody around that age?
No, no children.
Okay. All right. And it might not be yours. It might be a neighbor or something like that. But so you can use anybody you have who's in your life. But I'm going to ask you to imagine it's an 8-year-old because they are the kind of perfect person to match this. And you'll see why in a moment. So what I find is very helpful for people who are nervous, aren't used to speaking, aren't confident about it, is to find this convenient 8-year-old or a proxy for same, could be a 38-year-old, could be anybody, But what you ask them to do is to give you a topic, and the less familiar a topic, the better. So, Neil, do you happen to be an expert on penguins by any chance?
I'm not.
Excellent. So I might give you the topic of penguins and their habits, because I happened to have watched a video the other day of a bunch of penguins jumping off a cliff. They were having fun. They were landing in the water. It was a fun penguin activity. So I might say, tell me about penguins jumping off cliffs. Now, you probably don't know anything at all about penguins jumping off cliffs, but I'm going to give you 1 minute, and I'm going to rate you on your confidence, enthusiasm, and volume. And if you tell an 8-year-old this, they love it. They love watching an adult be silly about it. And they'll come up with the silliest stuff that you've never heard of and you know nothing about. But the trick is for you to be able to talk about any topic off the cuff, no warning, spontaneous, and then have immediate feedback. And an 8-year-old will do this with you for hours. It's just so much fun. But anybody you can get, and you can do it in the mirror if you have to, make up some cards or get ChatGPT to suggest a topic to you. The sillier, the better. The less familiar, the better. And you want to just get good at talking for 1 minute on any topic. And you want to make sure you sound coherent, that you aren't saying all the time, that you don't have awkward pauses, that you're confident, that you aren't talking to your shoes and, mumbling your words, but you're saying, penguins are amazing. They can jump off 50-foot cliffs. As a matter of fact, they do it for fun, and they have penguin Olympics, and they have competitions about how far they can jump and how many backflips they can do while they're doing it. Aren't penguins amazing? Right? And you can go on like that. When you get to that stage, you'll be a much better speaker just by having increased your confidence, enthusiasm, and volume.
Huh, that's interesting. All right, gotta find an 8-year-old and try that out.
Exactly. They're great.
Excellent. This has been a great conversation, Douglas. Thank you so much for being a guest. How can people get in touch with you?
Well, the best place to go is douglassquirrel.com. You have to figure out how to spell Douglas and then how to spell squirrel and then put those together. Or you can just search for Douglas Squirrel and ignore all the actual squirrels, because there's an animal called the Douglas Squirrel. But I rank pretty highly for that search term. So find me at douglassquirrel.com. The other place, if you really want more of the public speaking stuff, is my community of tech and non-tech people. I've got thousands of folks who gather together and come to my forum and go to my events and so on. And that's at squirrelsquadron.com. And there you'll find the archives of old events. You can sign up for my newsletter, sign up for the events and come along to some of them and see what I do and ask me lots of questions about them.
Wonderful. Well, everyone, that marks the end of another edition of Teach the Geek Interviews. My name is Neil Thompson. I'm the founder of Teach the Geek. I work with technical professionals so they can present more effectively, especially in front of non-technical audiences. And you can learn more about that at teachthegeek.com. Again, that's teachthegeek.com. Until next time, take care and stay safe. Thanks, Douglas.
Thank you.